The sun hung low on the riverbank as I balanced on the old log, trying not to look down. The summer holidays with my family always carried the same quiet brightness. Like a painting, you can't quite forget once you've seen it in the corner of your eye. Our cottage faced the water, yellow paint peeling like sunflowers left out in the rain. And every morning, the gulls stitched the air with their thin, patient cries. The air smelled of cut hay and something sweet from my mother's kitchen, bread rising, lemon rinds, a kettle always warmed on a dented stove. We children ran along the shore until our ankles forgot which way was home, then circled back to the long wooden dock where the boards sang with every footstep, a soft, tired sigh that kept time with the lapping river. On that particular day, the heat lay on us like a weight we wore for the sake of joy. There was a dare, as there always was during those summers, the oldest among us finding some way to test the rest, to coax a flutter of fear into ordinary days. My older brother, with the sun glittering in his hair and the confidence of a boy who had already learned to love the sound of our own laughter, measured out the distance between shore and a narrow strip of land that rose a few yards from the water. "Cross the log, kid," he said, grinning. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The dare belonged to that easy, familiar rhythm of our days, a rhythm you learned to trust because it never forgot to include an escape hatch of safety. My mother calling us to dinner, father's whistle from the footpath, the way the river kept droning on as if the world beyond it didn't exist. The log was a fallen thing, a piece of a lost dock maybe, slick with river slime and patches of moss that looked like little emeralds glinting in the sun. It rested above the current with a stubborn confidence, as if it knew the river would never pull it away. My toes wriggled against the leather of my shoes, the laces catching on a knot of my own making, and I felt that familiar tingle, the tug of fear, and the stubborn will to go on. The water breathed beneath in a soft, continuous hiss, a language I could almost understand if I listened long enough. When I stepped onto the log, the world narrowed to the width beneath my feet, and the sound of breath I pretended not to notice. The first few steps were simple, almost easy, as if the ground had remembered me from the years before and offered its quiet blessing. Then the log, old and uncertain, decided to remind me that it was a living thing, and it swayed with a little uptilt of danger that made my stomach knot and my hands rise with instinct, palms opening to nothing, seeking a hand that wasn't there. I don't remember if I cried out or if my mouth simply dried, but I remember the moment when the river, the sun, and the old wood listened to the careful, brittle note of fear in me. And then, somehow, I found a rhythm. I found the pace my body could hold, the soft hinge of the knee, the careful shift of weight, the breath that came steady when fear pressed in. It wasn't bravado that carried me, not really. It was a quiet decision to keep going, to trust the small, unglamorous muscles of my legs and the memory of my father's steady presence, even though he stood on the shore with his hat in his hands, turning it over and over, as if it could tell him something about the river. On the far end of the log, I felt the ground solid beneath me, an ordinary truth, a kind of mercy that allowed the breath to return. The land beyond the water, with its grasses and a cluster of cattails, looked familiar and new all at once. My chest still hummed with the tremor of fear, but a different sound joined it, the sound of my own pride, almost embarrassed by its own loudness. I did not shout or boast. I simply turned my face toward the shore and found my mother's figure there, small and patient, with a hand half raised as if she'd been ready to catch me if I stumbled, but also a little proud of the distance I covered on my own. That island, where the log ended and the grass began, felt like a secret you share with someone only after you've learned to whisper. Blueberries sprinkled the ground in patches I hadn't noticed from shore, and we gathered them with sticky fingertips, the juice turning our mouths a rosy red. The scent of berries mingled with smoke from the little campfire we coaxed to life with dry pine and a stubborn spark. The corn we husked later, the kernels hot on our tongues, tasted of sun and of rivers long remembered by trees that watched over us since our grandparents' days. If a melody existed for that day, it would have been the kind of simple tune a child hums when the world feels endless and safe. The kind of tune that doesn't require a chorus, because the river itself has given us the words. We ate standing near the edge of the shore, where the water kept its distance, but never truly left us. And I learned a new language that day, the language of careful attention. Noticing how the log returned to its old place with a patient patience after each step. Noticing how the wind shifted a blade of grass without breaking its quiet. Noticing how my mother's laughter, when she finally called us to the table, sounded like a soft bell that never quite forgot the sound of rain. It was a day of small miracles, of ordinary things becoming thresholds, fear crossing over into a kind of confident calm, hunger turning into fullness, a siblings' quarrel dissolving into shared stories around the fire. That memory did not arrive with thunder or a dramatic revelation. It arrived with the long, slow unfolding of an ordinary afternoon, with the warmth of bread and the coolness of river water on sore feet, with the sense that I was both visible and protected in a world that would someday become uncertain. I did not yet know that stories would become the way I kept the world intact for myself. I did not know that the very act of crossing a log could become a metaphor I would one day cling to when the edges of life felt slippery. But in the moment, it felt true, in a way nothing else had within reach. The truth that courage is often a patient. As the years passed, and the river kept its own counsel, that day faded into a cherished pattern in my memory, one thread among many that form the fabric of who I am. There were others, long drives home through fields smeared with the gold of late afternoon, the smell of rain on dusty roads, the way the world seemed to soften around the edges when the first star appeared in the sky. But the logging crossing remained a touchstone. It wasn't fame or triumph that stayed with me. It was a feeling of steadiness, a sense that I could be careful, that I could measure my steps, that I could keep moving even when the ground under me trembled a little. Now, with more wrinkles than stories left to tell, and more quiet mornings than loud, I return to that shore in memory. I can feel the rough grain of the wooden plank against my palms, hear the river's soft laughter, watch the light tilt along the water like a blade being drawn across a spinning wheel. I can almost taste the berries' sweet juice on my tongue and smell the smoke of the campfire curling through the trees. And I realize what that day gave me beyond the fruit of that moment. A steadiness in a life that would become, in its own way, a long, patient practice of listening. Because to cross a river, to step from one shore to another, is not merely a physical act. It is a way of inviting the uncertain future to stand a moment in your hands. To hold it still long enough to find the breath you need to take the next step. The memory taught me to attend, the slow, generous attention that makes space for fear and turns it into something human, something small and necessary. A smile shared, a hand held, a story told in a voice that does not hurry, even when time presses in. I have learned, as old age tiptoes in, that these ordinary days are the true keepers of a life. They are the vessels we fill with small, unassuming acts, courage measured in careful steps, kindness offered without fanfare, the quiet strength of coming home to those who love us. The river continues to unfold its lazy, patient arc in my memory. A reminder that no matter how the world shifts, the core of us remains a place where we learned to listen to the sound of our own breathing, the sound of another's voice, the sound of home. If there is a larger lesson tucked into that day, it is this. The heart grows strong not from grand gestures, but from the steady intake of light and breath and bread shared with others. Growth is slow, and sorrow and joy often arrive on the same breeze. Yet even as the years spill over into the next, I carry that hinge point memory with a soft, almost sacramental insistence, that a single moment of quiet courage could echo across a lifetime, turning fear into a path, doubt into a decision to go forward. Time will pass, and the river will keep its course, and the log may lie somewhere beneath the water's memory, reclaimed by the current and never seen again. But the meaning of that day, the sense that I could stand my ground and walk toward the next shore, that I could be a little braver because someone loved me and showed me how to stand, these are the things I keep. They do not fade with age, but insist on becoming a